So I'll start with what I do. I am a lawyer by day, and then in my free time, my passions are essentially fitness and health and martial arts. So yeah, I am a lawyer. I work for the government, and but apart from that, like my real driving force in life really is, learning about mobility, learning about health, fitness, nutrition, and then, through my social media, imparting that knowledge on other people, like spreading that information. And then apart from that, jiu-jitsu is like my passion. So that's my second passion. I guess they're kind of related because really the health and fitness aspect of my journey has really been part and parcel of my martial arts journey, really. That's kind of how I started learning about fitness and nutritionists, was so I could improve my performance in martial arts. And I met a lot of people along the way who helped me. I had a lot of injuries along the way. So that's kind of why I got into the lifting side of things and learning about mobility. Because myself, I had done Taekwondo early on. At the age of 16, I started doing Taekwondo, and then I moved on and started doing Gatka and Shastra Vidya. And then from there, I went off to law school, and there I met people who, were into bare knuckle karate. And so I started doing a little bit of that. And the dude who was teaching like an MMA conditioning class at my law school, he would bring some of us to his gym, and then I got into grappling. And then that's kind of just like how my journey progressed. And then when I came back from law school, I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu about 9 years ago. And it's been a really, really cool journey. And it's been about 9 years since I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I did Taekwondo for about 5 years. And then in between there, Gatka was like another 5-6 years that I was doing that. And that the school that I went to, it was called the Gatka Akara here in Mississauga, and by Dixie Gurdwara. And that school, it was a very like, it wasn't just Gatka that we did. We did a lot of stand-up. We did a lot of boxing, grappling. So it was just like a natural progression in terms of getting into jiu-jitsu and fitness.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people try and get their kids into martial arts like Taekwondo, karate. But BJJ seems really, really hard. So how did you stick with that, considering it's so rough?
That's a good question. So I did Taekwondo, and Taekwondo was really hard too, to be quite honest. Like Taekwondo, when I started, I had very little flexibility despite being fairly young. I was 16 when I started. My hip flexors, my hips, that region was like totally immobile, because Taekwondo, you need to be able to do high kicks and be able to be really mobile in your hips and rotate your hips very well. So when I started, it was quite a challenge, actually. It was kind of like, I don't know, Karate Kid kind of style, like introduction to martial arts, because you would literally be doing warm-ups at the beginning, and you would have to do like the middle splits and side splits, and your instructor would come around, hold your belt from the back, and literally spread your feet out like while you're doing the splits. So that was quite challenging, and the classes themselves were quite challenging. They were really intense, like, there was a lot of cardio involved. So Taekwondo was quite a challenge too, because if you haven't done something like that, it can be very challenging. But once, you start developing your mobility and you start developing your skills, obviously it gets easier and easier. And then from there, getting into Gatka was a natural progression, just because I had that good kicking foundation, because Taekwondo is all about the kicks, and they have beautiful, beautiful kicks in Taekwondo. And so having that mobility already built up allowed me to get into Gatka quite easily. And it's not just the mobility, like just having the body awareness, body coordination, that's really important. So in terms of jiu-jitsu and its difficulty, for me personally, it wasn't physically as demanding as it might be on someone who's never done martial arts, but it is mentally very demanding, because jiu-jitsu is really a technical martial art. It's all about technique. It's all about leverages. It's about, it's a match. So you're always, thinking of how to sequence submissions, how to sequence takedowns, sweeps. So it's a mental game more than it is a physical game, because if you watch some jiu-jitsu matches, there's what's called an absolute division. And absolute divisions are essentially all weight categories. So if you win your division or you podium, you're on your division and you place, then you can go on to the absolutes. And the absolutes is basically all the divisions. So it's like lightweight up to like super heavy. And so you'll find fights where there's smaller dudes who are beating these humongous human beings, and it's because it's all about technique. So yeah, for me personally, I find jiu-jitsu to be more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge, but it can be difficult on the body as well. That's why mobility is really important, because you find yourself in positions where you're kind of like a pretzel. Personally, I think mobility is really important for jiu-jitsu, and just having overall strength in your body. So doing some sort of weight training is really important as well, just because it can be really hard on your joints. So having, the muscular cushioning around your joints to protect them is really, really important. So I've had a few injuries from jiu-jitsu, not because maybe of the sport in and of itself, but because of things that I was probably doing wrong and not taking care of. So yeah, there is a risk of injury, and it can be obviously a physically demanding sport, because I don't know if you've ever done wrestling or anything like that, but it's akin to wrestling in some regards, because it is a lot of isometric holds, and that can be really, if people aren't used to it, especially white belts, when they start, they're always just like holding on for dear life, and that can be like really taxing and draining. So yeah, it can be physically demanding, but personally, I think once you start learning the technique, things become more efficient. Your movements become more efficient. You become cleaner, and you don't have to use as much jaw to to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So yeah, that's jiu-jitsu in a nutshell, I guess, in terms of like it being physically demanding. You do have to be careful with your joints, just because you can get put into arm bars and foot locks and leg locks and stuff like that. So there is that risk, but I mean, it is a martial art at the end of the day. So
yeah. I have a friend who owns a martial arts club, an MMA club in West London, and he was saying that the stand-up classes are really busy, but people go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then they never come back.
Really?
He said people don't seem to like it as much as they do the stand-up, I guess because there's no physical contact if you're just doing pad work.
Yeah, that's like, I guess the thing with jiu-jitsu is the learning curve is really steep. So it takes a really long time for you to start getting a grasp of things and feeling like you can actually execute the stuff that you're learning. So when you're a white belt, it's literally just survive. Like you're just in survival mode. And then once you get to blue belt, then you have a little bit more in your toolkit. And that's when things start to click. So I think a lot of people, they quit right at the beginning, like right at the white belt stage. They never let themselves get to that blue belt stage. And you have to go through that phase where you're just the punching bag all the time. And you're just literally trying to like keep your head above water. And so people really don't get past that, whereas like striking, you know, anyone can really pick up a pair of gloves and like hit a bag, and it feels good. You know, I'm not gonna lie, stand up feels good. Like you can get out a lot of aggression, and you can go home and feel, you know, like that stress relief, and like, you know, get all that anxiety out and your frustrations out on a punching bag or, you know, a pair of mitts. But with jiu-jitsu, sometimes you go home at the end of the day in your car and you're like, I suck. Like, why am I even doing this? You know, and sometimes I've had moments where you're just like on the verge of tears because you're like, I'm not improving. Like, I literally suck. So, you know, you have these moments where you don't have such positive self-talk, because yeah, everyone's, you know, there's always going to be someone better than you, and especially at the beginning, everyone's better than you. So yeah, that's why I think people probably quit. It is a challenge. It is, like I said, a very technical martial art, and some people just can't get past the initial part of that learning curve.
Resolve and that like stick-to-itness, which I don't know if is a real word, but have you found that's helped you in your career with work as well?
Yeah, definitely. What I do is pretty challenging. Like I have a pretty challenging job in terms of the emotional and like psychological stuff that I have to deal with. And just the volume of work. There's just so much work, and sometimes there's no thanks for what you do. So yeah, it's definitely helped me in that regard as well. Because I think once you have like really hard physical challenges in your life, and I think a lot of people don't experience those, everything else is just kind of whatever, like you can get through it, you know. Like I think the societal stresses that we put on ourselves, or the work stress, you know, just relationship stress, all that stuff, really pales in comparison once you feel like you're gonna, you know, be choked out or something like that. You know what I mean? Like those physical challenges do help with your mental fortitude in terms of dealing with the other things in your life. And coming back from a really hard jiu-jitsu class or a really hard workout at the gym, and then you sit down to, you know, do work at the end of the night or whatever, it feels a little easier, because you know you're eventually things will get done. You know, it will pass whatever it is that you're going through. So yeah, it's definitely helped me with my career as well, because it just doesn't seem as painful, I guess, as some people may make it in their minds. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely helped. I think having really hard physical challenges in your life makes everything else, you know, it doesn't seem as challenging. Yeah.
And you have, I've seen your page, and you have women that you train with at the club. I recently started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's probably maybe about 3 or 4 women at the club that I train. But they're mostly matched up with guys, because you can't just train with women all the time. There's not enough people and not enough probably diversity there. So how do you find that? Like, it must, because you're naturally going to be smaller than the majority of guys.
Yeah.
And that must be quite challenging.
So this is something that like I've spoken to a lot of females about, especially the girls that come to my home to train. So I've created a little bit of a safe space in my house for girls who may not be comfortable with going into a club or a gym, because you're right, sometimes there are no other girls, you know, and sometimes I'm the only girl when I go to my like gym to train, and yeah, sometimes there's no girls to train with. So it can be very challenging, especially for people who have never been in contact sports before, because jiu-jitsu is really, really intimate. Like you probably know, like you're in very close proximity, sometimes in really awkward positions, that someone who has never encountered that, or, you know, been in a situation like that, might feel very, very uncomfortable. So I think it's important, firstly, to find a gym that has maybe only women's only classes. That will help you get comfortable just being in close proximity to people. Even I've found with some people, they don't like being touched, and that's understandable. You know, some people have, you know, their either traumas or whatever it may be. People don't like being in close proximity to people. So just being with another female partner even sometimes can be challenging for people. So a good place to start is finding a gym that has a women's only class. Alternative is to find like a female coach who can do like one-on-ones with you. There are obviously female coaches out there. They're few and far between depending on where you are, but they do exist. So that's another option. And then the final thing I'll say about that is ultimately at the end of the day, you're gonna have to get to a point, and it's okay if it takes a while, if it takes a year, it takes 2 years, you're gonna have to get to a point where you roll with men. Because at the end of the day, if we're looking at jiu-jitsu as a martial art and not just a sport, then you have to be able to defend yourself against someone who's bigger than you, and you have to understand what it means when a man is on top of you versus a woman. If you don't understand what it feels like to have a 200-pound man on top of you trying to pass your guard or submit you, or is sitting on top of you in a mount, you'll be in utter shock if that were ever to happen in real life, firstly. And secondly, I don't think your jiu-jitsu game is going to develop and grow to the same degree if you're just rolling with people your size. Learning that aspect of jiu-jitsu, I think, is part and parcel of being a martial artist, is learning how to defend against different opponents, different body types, different sizes. So it can be uncomfortable, but it's something that I think all females need to do. And the reason I say that is because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're ever going to be attacked, most likely it's going to be a man. And most of the time, fights end up on the ground. So jiu-jitsu is very important for a female to learn. And then finally, not understanding what man's strength is and what a dude feels like in terms of when he's using all of his strength on you, it's going to be a shock to you. And if you've never experienced that before, you won't know what to do. There's that fight, flight, and freeze response that everyone always talks about when you're in a life or death situation. Kind of, most likely you will freeze. You won't be able to do anything. And if you're on the ground, you're not going to be able to run away. So your only option is to fight. So if you've never fought a man before, it's going to be a shocker, and as big as some females are obviously bigger, and obviously some females lift, so they're stronger. But at the end of the day, like, I can tell you from experience, like, a dude has like better grip strength. They're going to be stronger. They may not be faster than you, but that weight plays a huge role in terms of having an advantage. I don't know if you've experienced that in jiu-jitsu yet.
Yeah, I did wrestling for about 5 years, and even though it's not, I would say it's technical, but you could just be really strong and be really good at wrestling, just because if you got 60 kg or 120 pounds on someone, you're not gonna single leg them, you're not gonna be able to double leg them, you're not gonna do much, and they can just chest strap you and throw you over if they want.
Exactly.
So even male versus a male, when you have a massive size discrepancy or weight discrepancy, even if the person knows a little bit, they can beat you. For somebody my level, like beginner level.
Exactly. Yeah. And the funny thing is, like, you say that even if they know a little bit, like, these days, I feel like everyone knows a little bit, like, there's a lot of people that train, and, people who even just like horse around at home and try arm bars and stuff. They're dangerous because firstly, they may not have the best technique, and then, they're just going to try to destroy you. You know what I mean? So yeah, you're right. It is even for like a dude against a dude, it's difficult, as you said. So you can only imagine the strength differential between a female and a male. It's even bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think in our community, the other problem is there's a big emphasis on males, but especially in the UK, as far as I know, there isn't as much emphasis on females training. So then you have a size and kind of technical disadvantage, but you also have the fact that someone's never actually been in a confrontation or that kind of situation before. So then them being able to deal with that effectively are going to be really low because they've never think.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think obviously there's a cultural disparity between how we want girls to behave and how we want guys to behave, and guys can be the rough and tough and rolling around and doing martial arts, you know, but the girls are not encouraged to do the same. And I know that obviously there is a big community of girls who do Gatka, but I also think that they need to have that physical hand-to-hand sort of experience where they're in close physical proximity, where they're being yanked around, where they're, you know, being pulled and pushed and, you know, pinned. That's a different experience than, you know, having a farisoki and, like, you know, going and doing a Gatka tournament or whatever. It's very different because there is that degree of separation, right? That weapon provides a degree of separation and safety and comfort. Whereas like with jiu-jitsu, there's none of that. Like you're in each other's faces right from the get-go of the match. Like you're grabbing each other. So that's really important as well. And I think like obviously there is some sort of, you know, there can be, you know, people might think oddly that girls and guys are training together, especially in our culture. It might be frowned upon or looked down upon, but that's why I think it's really important to create those safe spaces where it's normalized, you know, and where you can have leaders who are there protecting the girls from, you know, creeps. So, sorry to say, they do exist, but that's part and parcel of the martial arts journey as well, is learning to read people, is learning to understand the people that you're letting into your space, you know, learning to understand who you can trust and who you can't. That's part and parcel of the martial arts journey. So if you don't create those spaces where you can have those interactions, you will never know, you know, when you're in a bad situation and when you're in a good situation. So yeah, it's important to create those spaces where you can learn those skills, because they're not just physical skills. It's about developing your mind and your psyche as well.
Yeah, I have 2 daughters, and I think I want them to train. My middle daughter wrestles, and my youngest daughter is only 3 months, so she's probably a bit too young to do anything at the moment. But I feel like martial arts not only teaches you how to fight, but it makes you a bit more comfortable in bad situations. So you don't have as much anxiety and as much kind of that panic response doesn't, because you're used to having that adrenaline dump on a regular basis through having to fight people in a training environment. So I think it's good for the mental aspect, not just the physical stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. Like even rolling on the mats is one thing, and then going into a competition is a whole nother level of like adrenaline dump. And I think everyone should experience that. So that's a really good point. Like, I think it's amazing that your daughter's doing wrestling. That's amazing.
Yeah, she's really good. She fights her brother at home anyway, so she might as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
But I think the stats in the UK are 1 in 3 women are assaulted, like physically assaulted. And that's huge. So yeah, they need to, unfortunately, it's a reality that women kind of have to face in the UK at least. And I know it's other places like India, I think, is one of the most dangerous places in the world for women. So it is really important. I wanted to ask about yourself, like if women, because I know the majority of women probably wouldn't feel comfortable stepping into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy unless they knew somebody else who went there. So do you offer kind of like a introduction? I know it might be remote, but can you do anything for that subsect of community?
You know what? That's a really good question. I've never really thought about doing it remotely. I know during the pandemic, there were clubs and academies. One of the academies I go to, the coach there, he was doing virtual jiu-jitsu lessons. And so I've never thought about it, but it's definitely something I'd be open to. The only thing with jiu-jitsu is you need a partner. You always need another body. It's not like, you know, Muay Thai or boxing where you can train on a bag or whatever. or shadow box. It's really hard to shadow roll. It's like impossible. You could do it with a dummy, I guess. But you do definitely need another body. So if I were to do that, and I think it's an amazing idea, yeah, you would just need another partner there. But it's definitely something I'm open to, because you're right. It can be difficult to find those spaces where you're comfortable, as a female, especially if you're a female that has good God, if you were at this thought and you have a good bond, it can be really difficult to find solutions to, those issues, because your thought inevitably, if you're rolling, will come off, and you can't have your good bond, in its normal spot, because it's dangerous, right? Like it is dangerous. So, so the girls I train with, they're trying to find solutions to that so that they can eventually compete, because that's what they want to do.
You're trailblazer, you're role model for women in our community. And I don't know any other women who are high, like brown belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in our community at all. I don't actually even know any women. The gyms I go to don't have any South Asian women who train at all. I mean, to become a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, out of the percentage of people that walk through a gym, it's probably 1% of people who get to that level. So it's such an incredible achievement. I think we really need to kind of show you off to the whole Sikh community. Say, look, there is somebody there who can actually knows what they're talking about and can actually train you up properly, and they're female, so they'll understand that, just things that males wouldn't understand who are trying to train. I'll definitely speak to you about that later, and description box,
because I do want to see more Sikh Punjabi girls and South Asian girls doing this, because you're right, I don't see them. I've been doing this for a long time now, and I haven't encountered one yet. Actually, I did encounter one, and she was in the US, and she actually came up to me at a tournament because she saw my name on the screen, and she's like, she was asking around like, who's the girl, and they pointed me out. She's like, oh, no way. She's like, you're the first like Punjabi girl that I've seen who does this, and she's like, you're a brown belt and you're here at PANS and whatever. So it was really nice to see, but you're right, it's so rare.
I want you to talk about your competition, and because that's another, like you said, that's another level, isn't it? Like going to a gym and training with people you're familiar with, if you're fortunate enough to do that, and are friendly, and it's a kind of camaraderie, is probably a lot easier than putting yourself out there, trying to make weight, trying to do all the preparation that goes into a competition, and then having a tournament. So what's the step behind that? How do you prepare, and why do you do something, especially Pan-Ams?
Yeah, so it's obviously been a learning it's been like a learning curve with respect to competition as well. It's taken a while to figure out a process and something that works for me. Obviously, there's a lot of anxiety, especially at the beginning going into competitions, because there's you put pressure on yourself to perform, and there's people watching, and like, what are people going to think, and all of that sort of thing, right? That all plays a part. So at the beginning of my jiu-jitsu journey, competing was just like for fun. Like I felt really good about it. And then as you progress through the ranks, I don't know what happened. It just kind of like, it got more and more stressful. So for me personally, what I've come to learn is that you really have to train like you're going to compete. You really have to be like, in the weeks leading up to a competition, you have to kind of visualize yourself going into a match. Because my biggest difficulty with competing was, as soon as like the ref said, all right, onto the mats, you would shake hands, and it's like, boom, okay, you're starting right away. And I would be like, oh my God, like we're going already. Like it was kind of like a shock to the system right from the get-go. And so what I started doing was I started visualizing during training, seeing the ref, say, come onto the mats, visualizing the stands, visualizing, what the mat space looks like. And that really helped me a lot, because then it wasn't such a shock to the system. You really have to be in that competition mindset in the weeks leading up to a competition. And then also learning to just, trust in the process. So in the weeks leading up to a competition, you kind of have to have a game plan. And I would say blue belt into purple belt, I wasn't really executing any sort of game plan. It was just kind of like a free for all. It's like going into an exam without having studied, And so learning that you need to have a game plan, and, learning that if the game plan doesn't work, you have a plan B and a plan C. That was all something that I had to learn. It wasn't really something that was taught to me. Training with different people, training with different coaches. It's something that I came to learn, and it was really helpful. You would think that you just step onto the mats and whatever happens, because anything could happen, but that's not entirely true. Like if you're really focused on executing something that you want to execute, you're going to make sure that happens no matter what. And obviously things can go wrong. And so you visualize things going wrong and, thinking about what would you do if things go wrong. A lot of it is instinctual. So you build those motor patterns into you through your training. And so then come competition day, your plan of attack should be instinctual. And then, your reactions to bad scenarios should be fairly instinctual too. So that's kind of how I learned to compete. It still is something that I'm trying to get better at, because you may be a phenomenal jiu-jitsu player and you may have the best game in the world, but being a competitor is a totally different thing. So being a good competitor doesn't necessarily mean your jiu-jitsu is the best. It just means you're very good at competition, because it's a different skill set. It's learning to control your emotions. It's learning to execute a game plan. And of course, there's the, physical preparation beforehand as well. Your conditioning and your health and nutrition, that's all part and parcel of that too. So there's like those three elements with respect to competition. Whereas like being a phenomenal jiu-jitsu player and, being a very good martial artist isn't necessarily those things, So it's two different things. There's like sport jiu-jitsu and competition jiu-jitsu, and then martial arts jiu-jitsu. And I think competition jiu-jitsu is really, really important as well, because learning how to deal with an adrenaline dump and being put on the spot is something that, as you were saying, most people never experience. I was just speaking to somebody about this the other day, about how, a lot of, especially like since we've been talking about females, is a lot of females don't really know what real violence is. They don't know what it feels like to be shook up, like with somebody else just trying to like smash your face into the ground, or, whatever the case may be. Like most people don't know what that feels like. And when you go into a competition, you know what that feels like. You know what it feels like to be zapped of all of your energy, because you had that adrenaline dump and you're holding on for dear life. You're trying to execute the moves with every ounce of energy you have. And then at the end of it, you're just done. And you're like, okay, how am I going to go into the second round now? If you win that round, like, okay, how am I going to fight in the second round? Then you got to do it all over again, right? And that's a very valuable lesson for people to have. And I think that's why anyone who does martial arts should compete at least once in their life, just to know what that feels like, to know what like a real fight feels like, because that's the closest you're going to get to a real fight in a controlled environment. So yeah, that it's been a journey. It's I still want to continue competing and still really get better at the mindset aspect of it, because I think that's what I struggle with the most. Because I think I have the skill set. It's just implementing it and believing in yourself. And that's something I think we all struggle with in various aspects of our life. And, it's something that jiu-jitsu has allowed me to work at a deeper level, because like I said, we rarely experience challenges like that in our life. Work and day-to-day mundane activities, like it's really not the same.
There's this quote, comparison being the thief of joy. And I feel like when you're doing something like fitness, there's so much out there, whether it's real or artificial, like people photoshopping their images. When I was younger, at least, the comparison that you would make would be with a very small circle of people. It'd be with your cohort and your friends and families. Whereas now, because of media, there's always someone who's going to be better at you. But then you, especially if you're competing, you might look at someone who's really good, like Gordon Ryan or something, and then just get put off because you think, well, I'm never going to look like that. I'm never going to be like that. How do you manage those kind of that self-doubt and those emotions? And I think my opinion is that it's heightened with accessibility to see what other people are doing, and especially people working, and there might be other people who are competing in the same bracket as you who train full-time, for example. So there's be so many avenues in which self-doubt can creep in.
For sure. So that's a constant struggle, obviously. Like you said, a lot of people out there, top level competitors, this is what they do. Like jiu-jitsu is their life. They teach and they train. They teach and they train, or they train and they train and they train, And when you have a full-time job and that's not your, that's not something that you do on a full-time basis, although, you do commit a lot of hours, it can be frustrating, and it can be, it can, obviously, it can be a blow to your self-confidence and ego. And then obviously when you go into competition and if you don't get the result that you want, that's an even bigger blow to your ego. But I think you always have to come back to why it is that you do what you do. Jiu-jitsu, I love it because it gives me a sense of accomplishment. It is amazing when you learn something and you're able to execute it. Even competition, like after competition, like win or lose, like sometimes I say like I'm done, like I don't want to do it anymore. And then after the competition, you're like, okay, like when's the next one? Like I'm ready to go again. Like, because you want to like prove to yourself that you can do it, and you want to push yourself and be better next time, because you're like, okay, I made these mistakes, I know I can fix them, like, whatever the case may be. You always have to come back to your why. Like, why is it that you do what you do? Is it for the accolades? Is it, for the praise of others? Or are you doing it for your mental health? Are you doing it for your own physical health and well-being? Are you doing it to learn a new skill set? Why are you doing what you do? Because if you're doing it for the praise of other people, then there's going to be an issue. Then you're going to struggle through your journey. And the accolades are nice. I think it's healthy to set goals and want to accomplish those goals. So if you want to win a tournament and you want to, be a world champion or whatever the case may be, that's a very, that's an impressive goal to have. And it's, a great goal to have, and you should go after that goal. But not because you want to post it on social media so you get the praise of everyone in the world, that sort of thing. There's got to be a deeper why. And I think the people who actually go on to win those big tournaments and stuff, I think their why is much deeper than, getting the praise of other people. So just bring it back to your why. Like, it doesn't have to be, your why doesn't have to be that you want to be a world champion. It could be very simple. It's just you want to lose 10 pounds. And I've seen people lose so much weight just from doing jiu-jitsu. It's you want to get healthier. You want to learn a new skill, whatever the case may be, just bring it back to your why. And you also build a really good community. If you do jiu-jitsu, you're going to build a lot of lifelong friends, because you literally, you sweat, you bleed, you cry together, like on the mats, so there's that community aspect of it as well. So you're always going to have people in your corner rooting for you. And the people who, really care about you, they don't care if you win or lose. And my coach at the gym that I train at right now, George Brito, he says, nobody cares. And he just says, work harder. He says, nobody cares whether you win or lose. Yeah, after your tournament, someone might walk up to you and congratulate you on winning. Or if you lose, they'll be like, it's okay, like, it's no big deal. But the next day, does anyone remember whether you got gold or silver or bronze or nothing? No, they don't. Nobody cares. Only you care. So if you care and you want to win, then work harder. otherwise, nobody really gives a crap. Sorry to use my language. Like, nobody cares if you win or lose at the end of the day, you know? So that's my advice, is just to get over those feelings of self-doubt and, you know, comparison, because social media is a huge disease these days. It can be a beautiful tool, but it's also causing a lot of mental health issues for that very reason that you mentioned, because we are comparing ourselves to these curated images. But just bring it back to reality. Like, be present in the moment, stop scrolling through your phone, and, you know, just have fun. Like, jiu-jitsu is fun, so go and have fun.
How do you balance all of this? Because your social media posts are incredible, and the quality of what you put out is amazing. You train so hard, and then you do your strength and conditioning and stuff on top of your BJJ, and then you work as well. How do you manage to do all of that? Do you not sleep?
I do sleep, actually, and I value my sleep quite a bit, so I make sure I get enough hours. I'm not that type of person who's like, you know, you can sleep tomorrow, you know, whatever what's the saying? I forget how it goes.
Yeah.
Basically, you can sleep when you die, or whatever the case is. But no, I value my sleep. It's really important. But in terms of balance, you know, like, everyone has a different lifestyle. For example, I don't have kids, you know, I don't have a spouse, so I don't have those responsibilities and obligations to other people. So that gives me a lot more time. But I do have a job, and yeah, it is a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it's exhausting. But I'm very regimented and, I guess, disciplined in that regard. So I manage my time very well for the things that I really want to do. And frankly, like, doing jiu-jitsu and going to the gym and being active are things that I love to do. If I don't do them, I don't feel good. I am not as happy. I feel sluggish. I don't feel as energetic. So those things are like non-negotiables in my life. So that's what helps me balance my work life. If I didn't have those things, then my life would be off balance. Do you know what I mean? I would be stressed out. I would have anxiety. So those are the things that I have in my life that help me balance the other part of my life, which can be very stressful. So it's a non-negotiable for me. I know for some people it's not as it's not the number one priority in their life, and I totally understand. If you have, you know, 3 kids and, you know, they're all vying for your attention, you got to feed them at the end of the night, you got to make them dinner, that's your number one priority, and that's totally understandable. But I think it's really important to make time for yourself. So if you're struggling with that balance, you just have to, you know, make it a non-negotiable. It's something that has to become a consistent part of your life. So that's what I've done. It's something that's kind of embedded in my schedule, and it will never move. Do you know what I mean? It's something that's never going to move. It's always there. So other things have to move around that. Yeah.
There's an interesting infographic on productivity, and it's based on found with that people assume that if you work 12, 16 hours, you're the most productive. But actually, it's the people who they do exercise, they do like meditation or reading or some kind of like downtime activity. They have time with loved ones and all social engagement. That kind of bad variety makes work, as opposed to filling all of your time with work and then burning out or getting sick or getting bad, for example.
Yeah.
So I think there is a misconception around kind of work until you drop, whereas actually the evidence shows that, for example, a 4-day work week, people produce more work than they do during a 5-day work week.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I know that I have a limited number of hours to get my work done, because then after I'm done work, I have to drive an hour to class, and I'm going to be spending 2 to 3 hours at the gym, at the academy, training, and then I have to drive home. So if I don't get my work done in that allotted time that I have for work, then I'm going to be screwed. So I have to be really focused during the day. So yeah, I don't wander around talking to colleagues and stuff. So that's a really good point. I never even really looked at it that way. Whereas like, you only have a certain amount of time, so you're going to get it done in that time period.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to highlight, because I think lots of people say, I don't have time to train, for example, motivation. So there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic is things like scale weight, and intrinsic is how something makes you feel. So the evidence you're intrinsically motivated, like you clearly are. You said, if I was to stop training, I wouldn't feel right. So that intrinsic, that feeling will keep you training for the rest of your life, because you're going to be like, actually, this makes me feel good. This is a stress reliever. So it's important to me. So even though I get to 5 o'clock and think, I can't be bothered, I'm still going to. And it's amazing that you have that, because I think if you've got that, you're set for life. And I think sometimes as a general population, and with the people that I speak to, I think we need to be a bit more in touch with that. Actually, how is this thing filling my cup, or is this emptying my cup in terms of my energy and my health and well-being and my spirituality and my mental health and physical health? And I think your life is full of so many things that are filling your cup. So when someone might look at you and they think, well, that's impossible to do all the things that you're doing, if you look at the things you're getting from them, for you, it's probably like, well, actually, they're all important, so I'm going to find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Where can people get in touch with you? How?
Good question. So Instagram, Stronglikeg, that you can DM me there. Sometimes I'm not the greatest with DMs. I'm not going to lie, just because there can be a lot. And like you said, time is valuable. So I'm not going to sometimes sit there and scroll through all my messages. But you can also email me at stronglikeg@gmail.com.
And if everyone else who's listening to this has somebody else that they can train with and is really interested in learning how to protect themselves and learning a life skill and learning about increasing productivity through health and well-being and all of those types of things, then they should definitely get in contact with you and book some time, because really, we should really be supporting you as a community. You're kind of like a beacon of light in our community with what you're doing. And 2, I mean, every Gurdwara really should have, be paying for an hour of your time for you to be able to train the Sangha there, because it's needed. We talked about the rates of attack on women, talked about how health and well-being is so important for mental health, and that's such a big hot topic at the moment. Depression and anxiety levels in the West being as high as they are. So
I would love that. My dream is to have like facilities at Gurdwaras, where you have mats, where you have like training facilities. So just putting it out there, to the Gurdwara committees out there to like start building these, the infrastructure for these things to happen.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And I look forward to keeping in contact with you.
Yes, me too. We'll make it happen.